It's time for the Sports Blitz, the only live-streamed local sports show in Arkansas, with all the latest on the sports stories that matter to you.
Welcome into the Sports Blitz on a Friday. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter. Dave may even say something over there today. In the Cogswell Motors Studios to bring you a very upset episode of the Sports Blitz today. Miami Heat lost Game 1 of the NBA Finals. No, the San Antonio Spurs didn't win Game 1 of the NBA Finals.
That's right.
The Miami Heat lost Game 1 of the NBA Finals. Must be nice to be able to win a game with the best player in the world on the sidelines because of cramps, because of a 90-plus degree arena. We'll talk about the impact of the air conditioning going out in San Antonio. We'll talk about whether or not we believe that to have been malicious. I do. I'll explain here in just a little bit. We'll also talk about what I'm going to call cramptonite. LeBron James is cramptonite. He's so good that there's almost literally nothing else you can do to stop him. But if he gets cramps, it's all over for him. And he's had these moments throughout his career where he's been in and out based on cramps. And it's just crazy that, it's like Superman. I'm not saying he is Superman, but he's this ultimate superhero, and it's just this one thing that there's nothing anybody can do internally, or externally. It's just something that's just kind of crazy that brings him down, and it's the same thing with LeBron James, that this is the one thing. He's never had a major injury where, Michael Jordan missed most of his season. His second season of the year. Larry Bird missed almost all of a year. Everybody's been through, but Shaq missed all this time. Dwayne Wade has missed time, but LeBron James has never had a bad injury. But the end of a playoff game, the end of an NBA Finals game, he can't go because of cramps. We'll ask today's CrossFit Russellville poll question: do you blame LeBron James? Do you fault him at all for not being able to play at the end of the game? I'm just going to be honest with you. I've never had a cramp. I don't know if it's just the way I'm built or what, but I've never had to deal with cramps on a basketball floor before. I've had to deal with plenty of other things, but I've never had to deal with the cramp. So I want to ask some of these guys who have had to deal with it before, the ins and outs of that. But at the end of the day, the San Antonio Spurs have a 1-0 lead in the NBA Finals, got a 110-95 win. We got a lot of detail, Weldon, coming into that game.
We really do. I look forward to getting to the poll question and addressing cramps, because you're talking to a guy who has his PhD in crampology. I mean, if there's a muscle to be had as far as cramping, I've had a cramp. I mean, it's a bad thing. I probably have on average of like 1.5 a week if you're averaging it out. I mean, I've been on this show at least a couple episodes and I've had cramps. Like, they're on there talking right now and I've had rib cramps. Like, no joke, and it's been pretty bad. But, we're going to get to that, and I look forward to the discussion. But, to zoom out, because you're right, we're going to look at things in more detail. But to zoom out, this series is interesting to me because obviously these two teams played last year in the finals, and so it's natural to try to make comparisons of how things looked last year versus how things look this year. And one thing that's different is I thought last year, and I know it's still early, it's Game 1, but I thought last year the series and the games had a little more rhythm to it. Even Game 1 last year, both teams offensively were a little bit more rhythmic. It was a little bit cleaner of a game. Yes, there were still some turnovers, but this kind of, especially in the middle of the game, got really muddy, kind of a grinded out affair, and neither one of these teams are what you would call your prototypical grind team, but I thought it was interesting that the game kind of took that tone midway through. And, one thing we talked about were the role players. I said I can't really put my hand on this series from a prediction standpoint just because there are so many moving parts. There's so many players who I've seen be really good and players be really bad. You look at the Manu Ginobilis. We've seen him when he's terrible against athletic teams. Wasn't the case last night. We've seen Danny Green when he's hot. We've seen him when he's cold. We've seen Bellinelli when he's hitting shots. Then on the Miami side, we don't know what Chalmers we're going to get. We've seen Mario Chalmers put up big-time jump shot and defensive performances in big games in the past, but we've seen the Chalmers that we saw last night, and that was a problem. He was flat-out terrible. So
13 minutes, 5 fouls.
I mean, he was just bad. There's no other way around it, and so it's really hard to put your hand on this series. I expect some of the Spurs players to be terrible over the next few games at some point. I expect Chalmers to get hot and play well. You just don't know with all these role players involved.
I'll talk about the person in the history of the NBA that I want to hear from today more than anybody. You'll like this one, and then also the things that changed in the game with and without LeBron James on the floor. Because this game, it is just one game, but I was very, very adamant about the fact that I felt like Miami had to win this game, or at least they had to go in with the mentality that we want to win this game, and they did. Until LeBron goes out. They were up 2 points when LeBron James had the first bout with cramps. The second time he came back in, which was the final play that he played, he scores the layup to get them back within 2, and then it was done. But I want to talk about what changes when LeBron's on and off the floor, because some people may not think about the depth to which he impacts the game. But before we get to the NBA Finals and we delve deeply into that, I want to look at all the periphery, all the other wire-related topics that we want to get to today,
Sure.
because I'd hate to leave some of them out. We did the other day. We were trying to get to at the end of the game, at the end of the show, about Arkansas Razorback talk. The offensive lineman that's transferred into the University of Arkansas, Cameron Jefferson. He's expected to battle for a left guard position, and that's possibly going to allow some freshmen to redshirt or some junior college transfers who are coming in to have the ability to not have to step in and start game one. This is a 3-year starter at UNLV who's graduated with his degree. He was a captain. He's a catch.
Oh, yeah, he was all Mountain West, I think second team all Mountain West. And, I mean, we know what the obvious question initially is going to be. Well, this isn't the Mountain West. This is the SEC. And that's a very valid question. But
dude, if you can block people, you can block people.
Well, yeah, I mean, the starting experience is huge, and you're going to be able to find out early. I mean, you're Arkansas, you have a defensive line. You may not have much else, but you have a defensive line that is SEC worthy. And so you're going to be able to tell in practice and early on if he can't cut the mustard at this level. I would go ahead and say I believe that he can. And, the Arkansas offensive line, I've heard people question, is it in trouble? Is it something to be afraid? The fact that they don't have 5 definitive starters, or they're kind of moving some guys around. And in some cases, that could be the issue, but I don't look at this that particular way, because I think Arkansas has so much depth and talent that it's a competitive situation is why you don't have definitive starters. I don't think they're searching for guys. You look at Wallace. We haven't even talked about Wallace, who will be coming in as a freshman vying for a spot. We know about Skipper and Kirkland, who will be the anchors, the talented returning sophomores. So I think Arkansas is in good shape. Jefferson's certainly going to add to that. It is going to be a fun fall camp. We like to look at the linebackers, the quarterbacks, and all of that as far as fall camp battles. This may be a fun offensive line battle that we haven't seen in quite some time.
Isn't it nice to have a couple guys that, it's not one of those Steve Spurrier, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one.
Yeah.
It's you've got 8, 9, 10 linemen that you're going to count on, which means that you got rotation ability. And, if one guy's not getting it done, the other guy might. So there's a lot of positives to that. But then, like you said, there are some possible negatives too. While we're looking at Razorbacks, Phil Steele has come out with his preseason All-SEC teams, and 7 guys from the Hogs made All-SEC teams. Trey Flowers, first team. Jonathan Williams and Hunter Henry, second team. And I don't know why he does 4 teams, but Alex Collins, Bray Cook, Darius Philon, and Sam Irwin-Hill all made the 4th team. So basically the guys that you would have expected for Arkansas to get recognition, Phil Steele recognized.
Yeah. That isn't one thing I question, and I don't know why the SEC all basketball team has like 7 or 8 guys per team. You remember we went through that and we saw like all SEC basketball first team. It's like 8 people on the list. Yeah. I didn't know you could have.
I didn't know you could play 8 people.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA they do 5 on the first, second, and third, whatever. So, with Arkansas, we're going to look at these magazines. Phil Steele has a great one. Athlon Sports will do their sporting news. Everybody's going to do their magazine. And let's just call it what it is. Arkansas is going to be at the bottom of the West in all of these preseason magazines. Let's get over it. We know that. I think the upside for Arkansas is there. I think we understand that they're going to be picked at the bottom of the league, but we also understand they're going to be much improved from last year, and it's just about whether or not that'll be reflective in their record. That's the only question about it. But I think we know why they're picked where they're at, but we also understand the upside that they have.
Hey, I'd rather them be picked low and overachieve than be picked high and underachieve. I've seen that happen more times than I care to recall, where they're going to finish third in the West or second in the West or win the West, and no.
Yeah.
So I'd rather them sneak up on some folks. I did hear an interesting poll question the other day that I won't steal, but it was about which team that Arkansas is going to be obviously not favored in any of their SEC games. Which team do they have the best chance of upsetting that's would be a significant upset? And, the more I think about it, the more I think that there are some teams. You look at the SEC, you've got Alabama replacing a quarterback, Georgia replacing a quarterback, LSU replacing a quarterback, Texas A&M replacing a quarterback, all these teams who have been very, very good in the past, and these guys that they're going to replace them with aren't going to be scrubs. They're all replacing quarterbacks. If Brandon Allen comes back and plays healthy, Arkansas is not necessarily replacing a quarterback. They're in the same system. They'll have some guys that they can count on, and who knows? Maybe they'll be able to have a leg up on some of these teams like Texas A&M and like LSU, and LSU's LSU, so they're going to be loaded. And
right.
A&M's been recruiting very well, but a lot of schools replacing quarterbacks, and sometimes it's easier said than done. They don't all step in like A.J. McCarron and just dominate from day one.
Yo, you're absolutely right. There's so many unknown commodities in the SEC. Does Texas A&M have the number one high school quarterback in the country? Yes, they do, but that's just it. High school quarterback. He'll be a true freshman. Kevin Sumlin, he still has a lot to prove. I think you look at Houston and how he was set up from that standpoint. Then goes to A&M and takes on with Johnny Manziel. So we have to see what A&M is going to look like long term, and that starts this year, in my opinion. Also, I have to look at the schedule, because the schedule makes a huge difference as far as these upset games. I believe Arkansas will get LSU after LSU has Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look that up. But obviously, that is a game that's a very possible win for Arkansas. Plus, the thing with playing LSU is offensively, because they're not dynamic, they're more dynamic under Cam Cameron, but Arkansas teams have been able to play with and beat LSU because if you can corral them defensively with your defense against their offense and manufacture enough points against their great defense, you keep yourself in the game against LSU. And so I think they'll do that. Missouri will be vulnerable. That'll be a road rivalry game. So, yeah, there are possibilities out there.
One other thing I want to get to, do you think that the Hogs are going to lose? And we haven't been doing a whole lot of research into this, but I did listen to some folks yesterday talking about Razorback baseball players in the draft, and Dave Van Horn talking about some guys he expects to get back.
Yeah.
It's always an interesting dynamic because in college baseball it's a little different than it is in basketball and football, where you can go pro initially right out of high school. You can go pro, you can take that signing bonus, and you can go on to the minor leagues. Or you can come to college and you're stuck for 3 years. So there's a decision to be made by some of the better players in high school baseball. So Dave Van Horn goes and he recruits these guys, and he gets commitments from some of the top players in the country every year. He does an incredible job of getting great players to say they're coming to Arkansas. Most of them don't come. He has to decide, how much effort and time he wants to put into to recruiting these guys, knowing some of these guys are going to go pro. They're going to get drafted too high. They can't turn down the money, and it just makes no sense for them to come. Then he's also got players on his own team right now who are eligible for the draft who, they're juniors. So if they come back next year as seniors, they'll have no sort of leverage in the major leagues or in the baseball draft. They have to go this year because this is the best that it's going to get for them. And then there are some guys who can improve their draft stock by coming back next year. So it's always interesting to me to see who goes, who doesn't. Last year, Arkansas had 11 players drafted in the Major League Baseball draft, more than any other team in the country. This year, in the first 3 rounds, they didn't have anybody drafted last night. So I guess that's kind of a good thing that Arkansas's recruits weren't drafted. Maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to get some of these guys that they needed in, especially hitters. They do a good job of pitching, and they've got some pitching coming back. Maybe Jalen Beeks will slide a little bit. Maybe this I don't want to wish this on him, but this arrest for DWI for Chris Oliver, maybe this knocks him down the draft a little bit to the point that he'll stay at Arkansas. We don't know. And again, like I said, I don't want to wish bad things on him. He did get arrested. It's not my fault. But I would like to see some of these batters that are supposedly really good hitters that Dave Van Horn's recruited make it to campus.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the mentality of you want to recruit well, but you don't want to recruit too well. I call it the Roy Williams model, and we may get to Roy Williams if we have some time. He's got some issues on his hands. But, you ever notice how North Carolina, they seem in basketball, they do a great job of getting really good players, but not the elite players. I mean, they have a knack for kind of finding that sweet spot to where they don't get a lot of one-and-dones, but they get like the next tier, like the really good ones. And if you're a baseball coach, that's really what you want to do. Arkansas, as you mentioned, didn't have anybody drafted. Serrano, he's expected to be back. We'll see what happens with the other guys, but this is Arkansas program. We talked about recruiting, and you did a very good job explaining of how it works and the challenges to do with recruiting. So, for me, Dave Van Horn's done a really good job. He's understood what he's had to bring in. There's a lot of luck involved. I don't think we understand how much you have to have great breaks and luck, and people end up at your school, people falling in your laps. And I think once the Arkansas catches some more of those breaks, they'll be a lot better off as far as the draft. And the next few rounds will be coming up here in the next couple of days. I'll be interested to see when and where some of these Hogs go.
It's going to be very, very interesting, and like you said, and I want to hit North Carolina just for a second before we hit break, because when we come back, we're going to dig really deeply into the NBA draft or into the NBA finals, and I don't think we'll have a whole lot of time for this other stuff. But Rashad McCants, former North Carolina star, was on a national championship team back in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s for Roy Williams. He's coming out now saying, basically, I had a 4-point and I didn't go to class. We took, these. Did you ever watch Sister Act 2?
Yeah.
This is what we call a bird course, because we fly right through it. That's what Rashad McCants was saying was going on at North Carolina during his time there. Don't know what motivation he has. I don't know if he's selling a book or if somebody paid him a lot of money or what. Somebody pissed him off. But Rashad McCants has come out now and said basically, hey, I didn't go to class. I had a 4-point. North Carolina's academics were a joke. Not like we didn't expect that was happening all over the place. And if you look at that North Carolina team back then, I mean, they were stacked,
they were good,
loaded. And is that why?
I mean, yeah. You look at McCants, we don't question the motive. That's obvious first. Why is he doing this? Does he need money? But it's almost like the Donald Sterling thing. Why or how it came out really doesn't matter now that we know it.
If it's true, for sure.
Yeah. The fact that we know it, that's what it's all about now. You can't really put that cat back in the bag. But, it's not really a surprise. A lot of times a lot of times this will be done a little more discreetly to make sure they don't get caught. But if you have somebody who's kind of rogue and doesn't go along with the plan, you may see this come out. I'm really interested to see what Roy Williams does, what he says, what comes of this, because for me, this isn't the first North Carolina-related issue. This has kind of been going on for a while. Now, the McCants part of it is new, but in terms of suspicions about some fake classes or some academic dishonesty and some things underhand, this has kind of been bubbling for at least the last 6 months to a year now. And now you have a face to it. It's starting to build. This could really turn into something, and it's interesting because it's one of the most storied programs in college basketball.
Speaking of college basketball, I was looking at John Calipari's new contract.
Yes, sir. $7.5 million.
$7.5. Nick Saban's making $7 million. John Calipari is making bank through 2021 to stay. That ought to shut down the NBA rumors for a good decade.
Yeah, because I'm sure.
Good Lord,
I'm sure there's a nice buyout attached to it, and Kentucky basketball it's one of those places. You look at what John Calipari has done, and look, we talk about him, we criticize him. It's warranted. You don't know where he's going to do one day to the next as far as his position or how he's talking out different sides of his mouth. We've talked about that angle, but one thing about Calipari is he does a great job of being more than just a basketball coach. Tremendous fundraiser, tremendous speaker, tremendous. He's just a dynamic personality who can really touch your program and impact it financially and as far as a profile in many ways than just coaching basketball. I think that's what this is about. He writes books. He gives so many speeches, more than just your typical rubber chicken circuit. He's a speaker. He's almost like a motivational life coach on the side. And so I think all these things kind of go into building his brand, the Kentucky brand, and I think this is kind of his payday NBA for it.
Building his brand. It's like Vernon Davis on ESPN all day yesterday.
Don't even that.
God, that was a joke.
That's gonna be a bad idea. I'm trying to trace that business plan of how you can have trade yourself publicly as far as stock, and I get that it's gonna be part of not only your earnings from the team, it's gonna be other things as well, but. When you invest in something, there's got to be some upside for it. Your salary can only be so much. It's not like San Francisco's going to say, well, you did raise $200 million from your IPO on yourself, so we're going to pay you $500 million because you're worth it. No, they're going to pay him what they're going to pay him. So the upside has to come from his sales and things outside of his salary. That's how I'm wondering how that's going to work. That's a different story.
All right, finally, before we head off for our first break, and Maddie, you can start the music because I don't want to talk too long about this. We talked about Arkansas Tech's new head coach Chad Klein. I wondered what the young new recruits, you got the Lee brothers, Freddie and Kendrick in Clarksville, and Michael Perry at Pottsville, wondered what they thought about Coach Klein getting the job. So I asked both of them. They're all excited about the new coach. It was something that keeping Coach Klein in the we talked about the Downey tree. He's already been a member of the Arkansas Tech family. To keep him in place was big for these recruits. They really like him, and I talked to Coach Freddie Lee, which is Freddie and Kendrick's dad, and he said he was excited about the hire. Michael Perry said he was very excited about the hire. He said it worked out just great. So we're very excited about the upcoming Arkansas Tech basketball season. If you're a fan locally, Weldon, it's going to be good for these guys to be able to represent these local communities and for fans to come out and watch them play.
Yeah, I mean, winning is great. When you're winning with homegrown talent, even better.
All right, let's hit a break. When we come back, we're going to get real deep and serious into the NBA Finals. Give us a call at 968-NEWS. That's 968-6397.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on. KARK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
gonna steal some stuff from David here. He's been giving me some information in the break. Achilles had his Achilles, his tendon. Samson had his hair, which is his issue.
Yeah,
I talked about Superman. Yeah, he has some woman issues.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, having girl problems. I feel bad.
That gets us all, though. That gets us all.
Superman. We talked about the kryptonite. Michael Jordan had his back spasms. I don't know if you remember that. For those that watched him play, there were a lot of times, well, Michael Jordan, we don't know about him because he's got the flu, food poisoning, and back spasms all at the same time. And miraculously, he's going to be fine. That's a joke, but so he had all these back spasms, and all these other guys have had their issues over the years, and LeBron's seems to be cramps. Seems to be that he gets in a hot arena and he gets obviously overheated and starts to cramp up. I never thought about what Weldon's about to tell you about his body chemistry and the way he is built being the problem, being the issue that causes this. But I think it's very, very smart of Weldon to have come to this conclusion about the game last night. Honestly, I'm sitting there last night watching thinking, dude, get your butt back in this game, because what people are going to remember is not that you had a cramp, it's that you lost.
Yeah.
And if they lose this series, it's not going to matter. He was saying, the Spurs will think it's not a big deal. They'll wish that LeBron had been playing. No, they'll be lifting that trophy and they'll be saying, we won 5 championships. We beat LeBron twice. Suck it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the narrative after this game. It was about the players during the post-game interviews, the Europeans, as if we didn't hardly have a little edge towards them anyway. It's like, we play in hot arenas all the time. It's not a big deal. And you know how they are. You look on that floor, though. You really look across the NBA. The average basketball player, like if you're a personal trainer, you're training a professional basketball player, you're going for a workout regimen that's going to lend itself to lean muscle. You want to be kind of long and lean. The need for bulk isn't really there. That's why you see, Ray Allen ran around all day. Ray Allen's skinny. I mean, he's got lean muscle. The Danny Greens of the world, of Tony Parker, these people are skinny. LeBron James, like I said, you can help me with this. Other than Kendrick Perkins, who has that much muscle mass, just like bulky mass in the NBA? I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. And then you look at Kendrick Perkins.
Dwight Howard, maybe.
Maybe, but see, Dwight's
doesn't move
sleek.
That way.
He's kind of sleek to me. I'm talking like big. But then he kind of moves like Blake Griffin. So it's like Blake Griffin.
And Blake Griffin cramps up too.
That's the thing. He's down that road of LeBron James, although not as much. But, to me, being bigger, bulkier, and still having explosive movements is a combination that lends itself to cramping up, because those muscles have to be satisfied. They have to have the proper electrolytes, hydration, the works. And so, these skinny guys, they can down a little Gatorade, a little water, and just run around and sweat and replenish. But when those big muscles aren't getting what they need, and you're still playing like a world-class athlete, this is where Kendrick Perkins gets out of the conversation. That becomes a problem for you cramping up. So, I don't agree with getting on LeBron James as far as, well, everybody else was fine. It does hurt him more than everybody else. And I will say this, the cramps are not the flu. The flu is something where you're drained of energy, but you're more calculated in your movements. You think a little bit more. You're more deliberate because you only have so much energy to use. So I think the flu, not over a season or anything, but in a stretch, you can play better basketball a little bit with the flu. A cramp is not about being tough. A cramp is you mechanically can't function, as in, like if my hand was cramping up, it's not like, I'm not tough enough to contract. It's like, I can't contract this hand. And that is a difference.
That's a good point, man, because I'm sitting there thinking, LeBron, man, it's not a good look for you to stand there on one leg. Well, if you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. And at the end of the day, LeBron just couldn't play. So 7 minutes of that fourth quarter, he cannot play. And San Antonio goes from tie game. LeBron, looking at the plus minus, he's even. He was 0 because the game was even when he was in the game. It goes from 0 to San Antonio winning by 15 points. San Antonio dropped bombs, hit all 6 threes that they took in the fourth quarter, shot 60-some-odd%. They shot 58% for the game. There are a couple things that I want to get to with the game. But while we're talking about, and we'll break down the game itself here in a minute, and I don't want to take anything away from San Antonio, although it will seem like that with what I'm about to say. I want to look at the cramps. I want to look at what caused the cramps. The air conditioning goes out. I don't know if it went out right before the game, if it went out early in the game, but we found out via the TV that you got these people fanning themselves, and you talk about how hot it is, and Doris Burke talking about, I took a thermometer down there and I stuck it in the rear end. No, I held it out by the court, and it was 80-plus degrees. It was 90-plus degrees. It was extremely hot on that court. Yes, they all had to play in the same temperature. They all had to play in the same gym. Weldon made the point about the muscle mass and the difference between LeBron and everybody else in that, and it's not even close, so I appreciate that. My question is, was it done on purpose? Was the air conditioning busted out on purpose? I've heard several, no, there's no way. There is no way that they would ever do that. I want to make the point that I would not be surprised at all if San Antonio sabotaged that air conditioning on purpose. Why? We talked about it before. LeBron James last year in the finals in Miami cramps up because it gets too hot. You go back and you look at his career. We're talking about one of the best organizations in sports. They understand history. They understand preparation. And when they go back and they look at LeBron's history and they say, this guy's had a history of cramping up. This guy's had a long career where he's had to miss time because of cramps, and he's had to go sit down because it got too hot or because he got overheated. What if we just shut the AC down? Is it beyond the realm of possibility? Not at all. Is it something that I think the entire organization was just like, yep, we're going to do this, and the president and the owner and all that were in on it? No. I'm saying there's somebody somewhere, if this happened, that could have said, hey, you, go turn, and there's two people that know, hey, you, go knock the AC out for the next couple hours. We'll fix it later. We'll get this taken care of. And a couple people know about it. Everybody else has plausible deniability. Is it too far out of the realm of possibility? You're talking to a guy who is not a conspiracy theorist. I know Weldon's talked about the NBA and how he thinks sometimes it's rigged. I've heard plenty of people who are even crazier about the NBA being rigged. But at the end of the day, is it crazy to say that they could have possibly shut this AC down on purpose? No, because they had the benefit. They knew that they didn't have anybody on their team, all these little skinny European guys who, in a deeper team, benefiting from the best player in the world having to sit down when you know Dwayne Wade's a negative 18 on the plus minus. You know that Miami has no chance without LeBron James on the court. Is it too far out of the realm of possibility to believe that they did it on purpose?
Not at all. Now, let me be clear about that.
I'm not saying they did it, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I can't say that they did it whatsoever, but to say to the people, I guess, that you've talked to who kind of got all, oh, you kidding? No way. I can't agree with that whatsoever. To me, it is definitely within the realm of possibility. It's not extreme whatsoever to think something may have happened. Again, I don't know. I can't sit here and say, yes, this was intentional. Yes, this was what they planned on happening. But you mentioned it. The Heat had more to lose in a situation of extreme temperatures because, look, I've said this many times. LeBron James is the hardest working superstar in the history of the game as far as just he plays like he's on a 10-day contract as far as his effort goes, even though he's one of the greatest players in the history of the game. And so when you look at what Miami, and this is a whole nother conversation, we probably wouldn't have time, but I heard it brought up this morning. This could highlight why LeBron would have questions about Miami long term because while it's not Cleveland bad, it's still a situation in which it's all reduced to being on his shoulders and him having to exert a lot. Again, I'm not saying as bad as Cleveland, but it feels that way in terms of I have to put so much out just for us to compete at a high level on a nightly basis. And I think that's a concern. So to answer your question, Mark, I definitely think it's within the realm of possibility, but I can't say that it was intentional.
Like I said, we can't confirm, and I'm not throwing out an accusation, but I'm saying, man, that they stand to gain a whole lot more than they could possibly lose. Their fans could be mad. Oh, well, but you know what makes the fans happy? Winning. So if you win the game, then you could say,
sweat all day.
Hey, who cares? We're good. And if you lose the game, well, it was a malfunction. No big deal. You're getting away with it. Why do you say this, Mark? Well, look at the old 80s Celtics. I've heard stories about this before, and we heard it last night. You heard all the players talk about, or all the analysts talk about this. Doug Collins talk about how one time in a playoff game he lost 15 pounds during one game because he sweat so much on the court. I've heard of stories about the old Boston Garden, how they didn't have an AC, but they would have fans, they would open doors, they would do what they could to cool it down in the Boston Garden during games. And sometimes when they play teams like Magic's Lakers back in the day, they turn off the fans, they close the doors, it just get hot as could be in there, 90-plus degrees, 100 degrees on the court, and the Celtics would miraculously have been practicing in this. They would have been prepared for it. They'd win the game. Oh, how does that... It's an advantage to the home team. You go back to the early 2000s when Indianapolis is flying all over the place in the NFL, and Peyton Manning's got his receivers on point, and they're just unstoppable, setting records left and right. And they go to New England, and what does New England do during the week? They start muddying up the middle of their field. You can look this up. This happened, and I know it happened. They muddied up the middle of their field with sprinkler malfunctions only on the middle of the field, only all the way down the field, so that it's muddy as can be in the middle of this. They got to where the NFL fined them, and the NFL reprimanded them for doing this because it was an unfair advantage to them. Organizations have been doing this for years to gain a competitive advantage. If somebody were to tell me that San Antonio, if it were to come out today that San Antonio sabotaged their air conditioning, I would not be surprised one bit.
I agree.
All right. Before we go to our next break, and I promise we're going to break down the game. I want to hear from one person sometime today. It's not going to happen, but I want to hear from one person in the world of sports. He needs to do an interview with ESPN. He needs to do an interview with somebody today. Michael Jordan needs to come out today and talk about whether or not he could have played with cramps. I know Isaiah Thomas said, I couldn't have played with cramps. Michael Jordan couldn't have played with cramps. And nobody could have played with that kind of cramp. Michael Jordan, I know his body type is different, so he may have never had a cramp like LeBron James had last night. But I'd love to hear from him today about what his game would have been like in the same situation. He can talk to the effect of, I've had the back spasms, I've had the ankle issues, I've had the knee issues for a little bit, and then I had the flu. What would it have been like for me last night? I think that would be a very compelling interview.
I think it could, although I have a sneaking suspicion.
It's never going to happen.
And I have a sneaking suspicion if he did, it'd be,
he'd poke at him.
I played through it. You know, we had challenges. We were faced with all sorts of things, and you just play through it. And you know, because especially, and he probably would have said this as a player, knowing how he's wired, but it's really easy when you're 51 and you know you're not going to play anymore.
Yeah.
I would have had my right arm cut off. I would have been right out there playing. You know, I was like, really, Michael, really? You know, and he may have. I mean, I know how he's wired, but I'm just saying, you're 51, you ain't playing anymore. You can really sit on your perch and talk about what you would have done.
110-95 was the final score. We're going to get into breaking down the details of this game. I know it was just one game. The Spurs have a 1-game-to-none lead. We'll talk about how important Game 2 is as well for the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs in this series. Had a lot of interesting conversation last night via Twitter and via the analysts. Some of the folks were talking about how this series was going to go. They've got it going a little differently than I do. I did see some folks finally pick the Heat, which early on it was all Spurs, and I was wondering if the Heat should even show up. And for 3/4 of the game they did. In the fourth quarter they didn't quite show up. But we'll talk about the game itself outside of all the other minutiae right after the break.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. You know, we've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
All right, it's time to get serious here on the Sports Blitz. It's Friday. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Matty Lassiter, Dave Brown in the Cogswell Motors studios. Got a lot of NBA Finals talk left to get to. I promise you we're going to get into the game here in a minute. Did you see that Gatorade was tweeting at LeBron James, trolling a major company, a billion-dollar company in America, trolling the NBA's greatest player about, oh, well, we could have stopped this if you just drank some Gatorade. LeBron's a Powerade guy. And I saw Twitter about the things that, the memes that they made up about LeBron James. Some of them were kind of funny, I'm not going to lie, about how he couldn't play and are you prepared for when it gets hot and that type of thing. But Gatorade, I thought it was kind of shameful and embarrassing that a big brand like that. Now, it's different for me to say something crazy and stupid, and I do it occasionally. But for a national brand, I don't do it on behalf of River Valley Leader, I promise you that. For a big national brand to stand up and say stuff like they did to LeBron James, it's shameful.
Yeah, and look, I don't know who started it. And that's one thing I would have to look at the timeline and see. But let's just say, for the sake of discussion, let's say that the fans started it. Gatorade may have started, but if the fans started and said, "Oh, your client is failing. That doesn't look good for you," and then I imagine the Gatorade account got mad and threw a hissy fit. That's what it looked like. It looked like, "Oh, come on, guys. He's not with us. Why don't you understand that?" And they keep getting tweet after tweet after tweet out at him. Finally, just get mad and say, "You know what? Forget this. If he were a Gatorade athlete, he could do this and that and that." And they just got mad at people mistaking him for a Gatorade guy. Now, if they initiated it, then that's even worse, because then I don't blame people, although they were wrong in thinking he's a Gatorade guy. I don't mind people coming after them then if Gatorade initiated it. But it just makes you remember how they hire anybody to run these Twitter accounts. We think all professional, big company, but they get like weirdo, random people to run these accounts, and they get childish. They get offended when, look, like I said, it was stupid to say, or if you didn't understand that LeBron's not a Gatorade person, you jumped on Gatorade without knowing the facts. Yes, that is dumb, but for you to respond like a petulant child really does look bad when you're a billion-dollar industry.
All right, we're getting into the game. After three quarters, it was Miami 78 to 74 lead over the San Antonio Spurs. Fourth quarter, 36 to 17, San Antonio wins. So that's why this talk about the Crimps is so important. That's why LeBron James not being in this game is so important. The guy finished with 25.6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals. He didn't get to play in most of the fourth quarter. He was even for the game, so basically the game was even, and then San Antonio won by 15 points when he steps off the floor. Is there a coincidence in this? No. In my opinion, LeBron James changes everything. Offensively, he's the catalyst. He's the guy who's going to get people open. He's going to get people open shots. He's going to score. He's going to do all these things offensively that you saw Miami struggle with down the stretch. They don't score 17 points in a quarter. The least amount of points that they scored in this game in a quarter was 20 in the first quarter, and that's because they were throwing up bricks. It wasn't that they weren't getting good shots, they were just throwing up bricks. They weren't able to do anything offensively in the fourth quarter. 36 points that they gave up in the fourth quarter. Does that happen with LeBron James on the court? Probably not. Why? Because he plays defense. He's the best defender on the court, too. What happens when LeBron James isn't on the floor? Well, you take off your best offensive player, that's a problem for offense. You take off your best defensive player, that's a problem for defense. But then you got to put somebody else in. So instead of playing LeBron James on a Kawhi Leonard or a Tony Parker if you have to, or even a Tim Duncan if that's the way it goes, or Danny Green, you've got to slide somebody else, a Ray Allen, a Shane Battier, Mario Chalmers back in there with Norris Cole or with Dwayne Wade. You've got to play somebody else. So you've got somebody else taking the shots on offense. You've got somebody else guarding somebody on defense. You've got the rotation all jacked up to where people are in the game at a time they would have never been playing. So they're just all out of whack for what do we do at this portion of the game? Where do we go defensively on these rotations because I'm playing out of position. LeBron's normally here, and now I'm there, and LeBron's the guy who knows what he's doing here, and I don't. So you got guys getting wide open shots. San Antonio hitting 3 after 3 after 3. I have to give credit where it's due. San Antonio played an incredible last 5 minutes of that game. They shot the lights out. I don't understand why Danny Green was the player of the game when he had a couple big shots at the end, but Tim Duncan had 21 and 10, and Manu Ginobili had 16, 11, and 3, but with 5 rebounds. But San Antonio played as well as they could. They played like absolute, heart stabbers, and they just stomp on the throat of the Miami Heat whenever LeBron James goes out. But I just wanted people to understand that everything changes when LeBron James goes out of the game.
No question about it. And for me, I look more defensively. I'll get to the offensive side in a little bit for Miami, but defensively, this is why I go back and I wonder about what LeBron's thinking about his long-term future, because it got to a point to where LeBron was playing whack-a-mole on defense. Oh, this guy's hot. Let me go on him. Oh, this guy's hot. Oh, now the other guy's
whack-a-mole. Yeah, I like it.
Now this guy's hot again. I just left him to cover him. It's like back and forth, and that's a problem. I mean, that's a problem. Not LeBron James's fault, but even when he does come back, you got to have some people defending better than that.
Yep.
And I think Danny Green was one of the biggest beneficiaries of it. I've said it, over for a year now. Danny Green, when you run him off the three-point line, he dribbles like a third grader. When he's wide open, he's a bona fide shooter. Go figure. Danny Green was shut out in the first half. Danny Green has Ray Allen on him those last few trips. Danny Green
just shoot over him.
Yeah, just shoot over him. The length wasn't there. And so defensively, and LeBron was roaming too. He was getting steals, coming off his man, knocking the ball away. Spurs were trying to get in clinic mode, and he was just disrupting. That went away. Now the offense, I'm a little bit disappointed in Miami. I understand that you're at a huge disadvantage without LeBron. Your chances of winning go down exponentially without LeBron. But offensively, I thought they panicked. I didn't think Dwayne Wade asserted himself. I didn't think they tried to run through Wade and Bosh. They just went on a Chinese fire drill on offense, and I didn't think they had to look that bad on offense. Still may have lost the game because defensively they weren't as good, and offensively they would still lose some punch. But I was a little disappointed to see how Miami just crumbled offensively with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh.
All right, now since I have to be fair here, I hate being how Miami lost the game, so let me give San Antonio the credit where it's due. They had 23 turnovers, and they overcame those 23 turnovers to win this game. They had more points off turnovers than Miami did. It's because they were extremely efficient. They shot 58% for the game. They hit 13 threes. If you want to talk about one issue Miami has had over the past 4 years in this run, it's that teams can hit threes on them, man. There have been more teams hit 15 threes on Miami than I've ever seen an NBA team have done against them. Yeah, Teletovic this year, 13 in this game, and it didn't seem like San Antonio was shooting all that well to the end of the game, and then their percentage went markedly up. But Miami has this issue where they do roam and they do fly around a lot. And when LeBron's not in there, I'm sure that had an impact. But they leave shooters entirely too much. And then you get situations like what happened last series where Paul George just gets hot. And then, okay, you had Ray Allen on him. And then you had to switch up to Dwayne Wade on him. And then by the time LeBron gets on him, it doesn't even matter. He's pulling up at half court, just hitting it in his eye. There's just nothing you can do about it. He catches it, it's over. So Miami has way, way, way too many threes that they give up. But San Antonio got into clinic mode in the fourth quarter. You want to talk about what we've been talking about for months about San Antonio getting into clinic mode? You watch the last 5 minutes of that game. What San Antonio did to Miami was prototypical blueprint clinic mode. Here's your rear end. Have some. They just handed it to them at the end of that game. So I have to give San Antonio a lot of credit. I didn't appreciate the fact that early on in that game, and I watched it and I tweeted about it, Miami wasn't getting some calls. Man, they weren't getting NBA champion calls.
Yeah.
I understand the refs were trying to let them play, but when I look at the game at the end and I see that San Antonio shot twice the free throws Miami shot, and then I think back to early in that game when Mario Chalmers got hit twice and they didn't call fouls. When he gets in there, it would have been free throws. LeBron got hit once. D. Wade got hit once, and they didn't call fouls that I think should have been fouls to put people on the free throw line. And when I look back, I didn't think so much of it. Okay, they're letting them play. But when I look back and San Antonio shoots 22 free throws, Miami shoots 11.
Sure.
I know that a lot of that, Weldon, had to do with the fact that Miami shot 29 threes, and they stood out there and settled for threes. But at the end of the day, I would have liked to have seen Miami get a couple more calls there. That's not a huge, huge issue. I really don't think that's the big deal at all. But I think it'll even itself out through the series.
Yeah. And I'll put a bow on my part of the LeBron effect on the game. I'll say this. I think it had a huge effect on the game. Can't say either way as far as Miami would have won or Spurs would have won no matter what. If you're a Miami person, not saying you in particular, but some Miami people would say, oh, we definitely would have won. And then you have the Skip Baylesses of the world who would say, well, they wouldn't have won by 15. They just would have won by 8. I don't see anything either way. Because the Miami got out to a lead. Spurs called timeout. Even with LeBron out there, they were coming, but Miami still had the lead. But a Spurs run was a little kind of on the horizon. So I just don't know. So I'm not even going to touch that part of it as far as who would have won. Let's talk about this, Mark. What was an aberration and what was not? Because that's a big part of the discussion today. People want to know, oh, this won't happen again. Yes, it will. No, it won't. I got good news. I got bad news for the San Antonio Spurs as far as what's an aberration, what's not. The good news is some people are saying their shooting was uncharacteristic. I don't. I think they can shoot somewhere in that neighborhood pretty consistently just because that's who they are. The bad news is the turnovers. Everybody says, oh, they may not turn over 23 times, but I think the Spurs are going to consistently turn the ball over in this series because the only way you avoid turnovers is if you play stagnant isolation basketball where the ball's not available to be stolen a lot. The Spurs are going to be who they are. They're going to pass, cut, pocket pass, backdoor. They're going to try that no matter if they're playing the Houston Rockets defense or if they're playing the Miami Heat defense. They're going to run their stuff. I think they're going to consistently turn the ball over. And so I don't think 23, while it may not be that high, I do think they're going to keep turning it over.
No, that is an excellent point. The more you pass the ball, the more chances there are for turnovers. It's just like in any other sport. The more you swing the bat, the more often you can strike out. It's like the home run hitters, man. They stand up there, they strike out 200 times a year and hit 50 home runs. Well, the more you swing, the more chances you have to miss. The more chances you take offensively passing the ball around and just swinging it, the more chances for teams like Miami who jump in passing lanes to get in there and steal passes and make you create turnovers. Early in that game, San Antonio was sloppy. They overcame it to win the game. They asked Tim Duncan, what allowed you guys to come back? He said, we stopped turning the ball over. They were in the game the whole time. What allowed you to come back and win the game late? We stopped turning the ball over. But it all revolves around the fact that LeBron James wasn't in the game. So what happens in Game 2? I believe in Game 1 that Miami needed to win that game because of the psychological factor that if you win Game 1 in San Antonio, you've already got your split. All the pressure then goes to San Antonio in Game 2 because you can't lose both games at home. Because then you can go back to Miami. If Miami keeps rolling, they can close you out. They can sweep you at home. You don't ever get to come back home. So all the pressure in Game 2 would have been on San Antonio. In this case, all the pressure's now on Miami because you don't want to go home down 0-2 because you've still got to win a game at San Antonio since you don't have home court advantage to win this series. The earlier that you can get this win on the road, if you can still keep home court by winning your games at home, the better and the better chance you have of winning this series if you're Miami. So I believe all the pressure now is on Miami in Game 2. I believe they're going to get it done.
Here we go again, role players. Look, this cannot be. It is too dangerous to make this a LeBron James game. The role players are going to have to show up in this game because if it's about LeBron just having to go win the game against San Antonio, I don't like those chances. I pick Miami to win this series in 7. Obviously, going down 0-2 would really hurt their chances. So I'm going to go ahead and say those role players are going to show up, be it Chalmers, Ray Allen, Rashard. Somebody's going to hit some shots and get this thing done. Dwayne Wade being more consistent throughout the whole game because they do need to win. Now, I will say this, Mark. If the Spurs win Game 2, obviously I think they're the heavy favorites to win the series, but I'm still not going to give up on Miami, and here's why. I saw what the Spurs did after they boat raced Oklahoma City for 2 games, and then Ginobili went back to his 8 turnovers, just 2 dismal games. I think Miami would blow them out in Game 3, and I think it'd be a toss-up Game 4. I wouldn't favor that, but I could see it still being possible Miami winning 2-0 at home, but you don't want to go there if you're the Heat.
That's why I think Game 2 is so important, because if they can win both of those games, they come back to San Antonio up 3-1. They're still playing an all-time great team who's won 3 to 4 championships depending on the stars of that team. But you got a chance to go back to San Antonio and close them out at San Antonio in Game 5. And I know this is way, way down the line from a team that's down a 1-0, but I'm thinking about how this would go if Miami is to win Game 2 and then go home and win. They would be up 3-1 rather than down possibly or tied in this series where they'd have to win another game in San Antonio. So I just think Game 2 is very, very important for Miami. I'm trying to think about how this series will go, but really at the end of the day, it just comes down to who plays better in this series. And that one thing I noticed throughout this game, watching the playoffs so far, you've seen teams that you're just like, man, this team's so much better than that team. It's not even worth messing with because we know that Miami's better than Indiana. We know Miami's better than Brooklyn. It's just wait and see time for who they're going to play in the finals. And then on the other side, you had San Antonio against Portland, and it's just like, you watch Game 1, you're like, we know how this series is going to go. But when you watch the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs, it's like, that's basketball. That's what this is supposed to be. That's the payoff. For all the crap we've had to endure, that's the payoff. That it's beautiful basketball at times. I know it was rough because they turned the ball over a lot, but that's 2 heavyweights swinging haymakers at one another, and I just think it's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I think the flow is interesting. I said this at the top of the show. Last year's series had great flow. Both offenses were just banging threes down, just getting on runs, and it was just Tony Parker and the Spurs doing their thing, and LeBron, and everybody was just in such a great offensive rhythm. Last night, you didn't see much rhythm throughout the core of that game. It kind of got a little bit low scoring. I thought the halftime score was a little bit lower. I think these teams can get to 60 points and a half, at least one of them. I think that they have this type of offense, so the pace will be interesting to me because I've said it before. Both teams like to play at a nice pace. Obviously, Miami wants to rip and run off turnovers. And even the Spurs don't like to walk it up. They like to push, see if there's anything early, and yes, they'll back it out. But they even play with some pace, too. So the pace is what I'm interested to see the rest of this series.
Well, we'll be monitoring the rest of this series. I guess it's Sunday at 7 o'clock.
Sunday, yeah. Extra day for LeBron to rest, so
they're going to have to pump some fluids into them, and they're going to have to get this all sorted out so that Game 2 doesn't go quite the same way. I bet you miraculously the AC will be working for Game 2. And you know what? I bet it's going to be a couple degrees warmer than what their normal AC setting is, just because the AC's working. I don't know what you're talking about. It's warm in here? No, I think it's good. The AC's fine. There's nothing wrong with the AC. You'll see that. And then in Miami, they're going to be having fans beside the court. You remember the old school gym where they had the big old fans? They're going to have those sitting right beside the court. LeBron's going to be sitting his face in it every 4 seconds. They said he was changing clothes at halftime. He changed jerseys at halftime. They ice baths and all this crap to try to keep these guys cool, and it still didn't matter for him. He cramped up, and that's a shame. So we'll see if he's able to overcome his cramp tonight and win this series for the Miami Heat. It's really about whether or not he plays well, whether or not they have a chance. Do you think that your boy California Chrome's going to win the Triple Crown?
I'm gonna say Chrome gets it done. First
Me
time
too.
since the firm, like 78, I think. So,
78. Yeah,
I think.
because we're both horse racing connoisseurs as well, so we're right there. We know the ins and outs.
What about Cap? You think he's worth the money? Colin Kaepernick, $61 million guaranteed.
No, he's not worth the money. But he had to make the money.
That's
They had
the
to pay
market,
him.
yeah.
They had to pay him that. The only way that they could have avoided that, and apparently he put it together a cap-friendly deal to where, and not cap himself cap,
Yeah,
salary cap friendly deal to where he, the the San Francisco 49ers had the ability to re-sign some guys like Vernon Davis who they need because he's smart enough to know that, even if I make all this money and my team's terrible, it's not going to be much fun. So he put together a salary through his extension that is going to work for the team. But, yeah, what was the number there that he signed? It was a ridiculous number.
I can't find the years. I know 126, but 61 guaranteed, so that's just breaking the bank. Biggest ever for a quarterback, and it's the market. We know Colin Kaepernick is not a top 5, really probably not even a top 10 quarterback, but you know how it goes. When it's your turn to get paid, you're going to be the highest paid in history. I think it's good he did that cap-friendly deal. People got on Flacco because the Ravens lost people off that Super Bowl team in the midst of re-signing him, so good for a PR
Kaepernick
situation.
was scheduled to make $1.073 million this year. Instead, he signed a deal for $110 million and 61 of it guaranteed. He's going to get $12 million in signing bonus, which he's going to make more in a signing bonus for just putting his name to that paper than his entire first contract would have paid him altogether. So
nice.
That's what happened. Yeah, he actually made more money when he signed that piece of paper than any of us will make in our life. That's got to put it in perspective right there. Maddie is Donald Trump. Yeah, well, selling used cars probably not gonna get you Colin Kaepernick money.
Oh,
this is no offense. Meth game, awesome. He said it.
He said it.
You got Heisenberg over here. If you find out that there's some purple meth floating around
wasn't
Russellville,
the sheriff just in this office last week?
Sheriff Jones, did you hear that? Oh man, Maddie, I'm just saying. All right, we have completely run this show off the rails, and that's all the time we've got for a Friday. Weldon, is there anything else you want to add? I hate to run you off without having you say anything.
No, I'm good to go. Game 2 Sunday. I look forward to it.
All right, Miami. LeBron, get your crap together. Let's win Game 2. I said it. Let's win Game 2 so that this is a series.
Spurs in 6.
Screw you,
Spurs
Skip.
in 6.
All right. Well, that's all the time we've got for a Friday. We'll be back on Monday at 11 o'clock for Weldon and Maddie and David. I'm Mark saying so long. We'll see you at rivervalleyleader.com, 11 o'clock on Monday.